Hi students, let's continue on our quest for really good notes regarding the 5 themes of geography. And we stopped last time with movement and region, and so we better pick up with the HE of Mr. Help. So this video is going to have the HE and also the P of Mr. Help, but I'm going to save the L for a third video because it's a little bit more involved, some of the things that I need to explain to you about latitude, longitude, and things like that. So and time and that kind of thing. So I'm going to put HE, human environment interaction, in this video, and also place, the P part of Mr. Help. But in the third video, we'll talk about location. Okay, so yes, the 5 themes of geography are always connected to each other, and you can't properly understand the answer to why of where that we focus on in geography unless we apply all of these themes to that question. So when we ask why do people settle in a certain place, why is a certain crop or a certain wine variety important, or comes from, known to be from a particular place, it has a lot to do with the human environmental interaction of that location. Okay, look at how many different elements of Mr. Help I stuck in that one sentence, right? So we've got the connection that all of them have to each other. So when it comes to human environment interaction, what I need to know from you, or what you need to be able to explain, is that this is about the feedback that humans get from the environment and the environment gets from humans. So how do these two elements affect each other, and what's the chain of reactions that occurs because of that interplay, because of that relationship? So we, as you can see from the information on the board, we depend on our environment because of a variety of things that we need in our daily life, such as materials to build shelter, or certain types of soil to grow certain types of crops, irrigation, transportation, like we were talking about in movement in the first video. So we humans depend upon the environment, and sometimes that means that we rely on the environment the way that we find it, such as a river is located in a certain place, and we are going to use that for transportation. So you see the barge traffic that I have a picture of right here. So the Arkansas River, for instance, where Little Rock and North Little Rock kind of sandwich the Arkansas River between them, is a major thoroughfare for all sorts of transportation. The airport is right on the river. It happens to be right on the river in our location. And we depend on that kind of environment, that transportation in the environment, in order to have movement take place, to talk about functional regions of delivery areas, or the port of Little Rock, where all of the most all of the barge traffic can pick up or drop off some of the different deliveries that they have. We modify the environment too. Sticking to the river, there are a series of locks and dams on the Arkansas River that break the river into different pools within it. And therefore, when you have a lot of snowmelt in Colorado, or a lot of rainfall up river, the lock and dam system the people who are in control of the lock and dam system can modify how many metric tons of water come through the dams at what point. They can drain something if we anticipate a whole lot coming from upstream. You can look at the way levees are built to modify the environment so that when a flood does happen and overflow occurs, you protect some of the dwellings, some of the business places that exist along that river, because they've located there because it's a center of commerce, and everything spreads from that particular location outward. So we modify our environment to suit our needs, such as the water resources that I've been talking about, but also we can use that environment for our own benefit. So we can dig a root cellar to store veggies for the cold winter months so that they don't freeze and so that they are kept dry and are stored for long periods of time. We can grow lots of crops during the growing season where we do have that, that growing season in our location, and then we can can things and keep those for the times when the environment does not give us a growing season. We adapt to our environment also, and the environment has to adapt. I should put air quotes around that, has to adapt to what we do to the environment also. So the adaptation example that I have on the board is just, modifying the way that you dress from one day to the next or from one climate to the next. However, a lot of times, if we have farmland, for instance, or if we want farmland, something that we call arable land. We will be talking about that soon when we transition into demographics. But when we talk about arable land, that means land that is available for farming. It is ready for farming. So a forest is not arable land because you've got the trees there. You'd have to clear it and get rid of the stumps and modify the environment in order to be able to use it for farmland. And so a lot of times if we modify too much, then the environment, the land doesn't necessarily yield what we had hoped. There is a Ken Burns documentary called The Dust Bowl, and it talks about before, in the decades leading up to the Great Depression, how people moved to the Great Plains like Kansas and Nebraska and Iowa and those kinds of states that are known for their corn or for their wheat production. And the grasses that were on those plains were cleared and the soil was tilled up. And this really changed the environment for a short period of time that was devastating on the economy and on the livelihood of the people who lived there. And so even though we modified that environment to try to produce more wheat and more corn, the climate did not adapt in a favorable way to give the right irrigation that people needed. And the storms were just, the dust storms that were dry wind storms just blew across the land and dried up the soil, and the savanna grasses that had been there and really protected the water content of the soil vanished, and it became somewhat of a desert-like condition, very dry desert-like condition for a long time, until an adaptation to that modified environment meant that vast irrigation systems had to be created and implemented in that area for the environment to recover or to be modified even further so that we could depend on it for the purpose that it was intended in our culture. So that's human environment interaction. Let's talk about place now, because the weather systems and things like that I was just mentioning has a lot to do with the way you define place, or the way we describe what a place is. So place is different than a location, because a location is going to be an absolute pinpointed address, for instance, that we'll talk about in just a second, or a generalized thing. Like I think I used the example of something being down the street from Kentucky Fried Chicken or across the street. That's a generalized location. But place is going to be a description of the way an area looks or feels, or the features that it has. So you can have physical characteristics. You do have physical characteristics and or human characteristics to describe your place. So place is the description of those characteristics for the particular location. Okay, so physical characteristics are going to be not just things that you can necessarily touch, but what about the weather systems that people tend to experience? So for instance, the jet stream dips over Arkansas in the wintertime and lets those Arctic air plunges, like you hear the weatherman talk about, come from Canada. The Arctic air dips down because the jet stream swoops underneath Arkansas, dips down underneath it. It shifts some as the rotation and the tilt of the Earth goes around the other side of the sun for the other part of the year, and you have a different angle of incidence for those sun rays, and then you have a different kind of weather pattern where you have Gulf air coming up toward Arkansas with all the humidity and the instability and all those kinds of things. So those physical characteristics can be mountains, can be this barn like we're talking about, can be the grasslands in this picture that I give you the example of, but it's also about weather patterns that you can expect. It's about the wildlife that tends to live there, the ecosystem. All of these kinds of things can be part of the physical characteristics that existed in nature or that were modified. So for instance, fire ants, which I don't know about you, but I have to deal with a lot of fire ant problems. They are not native to this area. They are invasive. But the characteristics of this place, the physical characteristics of this place are wonderful for them. So they grow and thrive and move all over the place because they love the physical characteristics of this particular place. And so we have this invasive species among others. There's many other invasive species that really are not native to this area, but really love this place because of the physical climatic characteristics, soil composition. There's certain crops that grow really well here that don't necessarily grow well in other places. Rice is does really well here. Stuttgart, Arkansas, just down the river a ways, and inland from the river, is, I think, the rice producing capital of the world. I was going to say the rice producing capital of the United States. It certainly is that, but I think it also has that distinction for the world. And so there's a lot of exports and movement of that crop to the places that need it, the places that buy it. Okay, so there's also human characteristics because, of course, we modify the environment, we adapt to it, and so if we might need to use that river for transportation, but we also maybe need to get across that river to, by land, so to speak, so that we can have different pathways of transportation and idea, information, and human and goods exchange of those kinds of things. So when you describe a place, it's different than a location. Describing a place might give the precise location, which again, the next video is going to talk about location. So when you're describing a place, you can give the precise location, but we also want those characteristics that are physical, as in coming from the environment, the climate, the weather system, the topography. Are there hills? Are there plains? Are there valleys? Are there mountain peaks, rivers, streams? Is it rocky soil? Is it clay, sand? These kinds of things. Salt content, those kinds of things could be a description of the physical characteristics of place. And then the human characteristics of place is that evidence of modifying the environment. The human-environment interaction modified gives us the human characteristics of a place, but also the demographics, which we will talk about in one of the next videos, not the next one, but one of the next videos. Demographics, it means like, what is the people composition of a place? Does it tend to be religious practitioners, thus we call it the Bible Belt? Does it tend to be this ethnic group compared to that ethnic group? So not only the things that people build and change of the environment, cut the trees down and turn it into farmland, but what are the characteristics of the people themselves? Of a particular place. If you know about the Mississippi River Delta region in the United States, it traditionally has a human characteristic of poverty, impoverished and traditionally undereducated individuals in the Mississippi River Delta region of the United States. So we're talking about Delta, we're describing the human characteristics of place and all of those kinds of things that make up that region. So all of these things are connected, in other words, bringing it back around to reminding you that all of these things are connected. Okay, so the last video to really take Mr. Help apart and examine it is going to cover location. And so I'll see you in that video real soon. Bye.